Hey guys, Tommy Kerrigan with Tommy Untamed. We've got a great show coming up. Thank you for watching. What's up, guys? Thank you for watching Tommy Untamed. We're going to take a quick break and give a shout out to the sponsors who support the show and make it possible. The world's smartest investors are not buying oil stocks, they're buying mailbox money or oil royalties instead. I'm talking about passive income that shows up month after month, starting with as little as $25. Visit KerriganOilBoom.com to discover how to tap into monthly royalty checks from America's most productive oil basin. You don't need to be wealthy or connected, you just need a regular brokerage account. That's KerriganOilBoom.com to learn how you could start collecting oil royalty checks every month. Heaven's Harvest Prepper Food, 72 servings per pail, 25 years shelf life. I've had the owner Clayton on the show before. He's a God-fearing, America-loving patriot. Get one of these, get a couple of them, throw them in your basement. It's good to have it, not need it, than to need it and not have it. If you don't want to do that, you can get their seeds. You can plant your own garden, so you don't even have to keep buying them. You can just get the goods and start your own, or you can even get freeze-dried fruits and vegetables like bananas, apples, strawberries, and raspberries. They support the show. It's an honest product. It's a good safety measure to have, and they keep my show free for you. So I'd implore you guys to please go to heavensharvest.com, use the link in the description, promo code TPC. Axios Fitness Coaching is a premium resource for holistic strength and conditioning services. Axios is best known for the Training Club, capital T, capital C, an exclusive community that prioritizes accountability, technique, diet, and nutrition. Everything you need to do to take action against the decay of the modern world. Whether you're looking to improve your physique, build strength, or just take care of your health and fitness, Axios will provide you with a solution that is effective and simple to execute. All you need to do is complete the intake survey, and you can see if you're a good candidate for the training club or any other of the services. And it's going to sponsor the show. So, one company falls off, another one arises. So, if you guys like the show, you want to work out, throw the show a couple shekels, go take the survey. Thank you so much, guys.
Higher ultraviolet exposure is associated with lower mortality. The United Kingdom is a high latitude and low sunlight country. Researchers there collected data on over 360,000 participants in a study of UV exposure via solarium use. When compared with non-users, solarium users had 15% risk lowered of all-cause mortality, 23% lower risk of cardiovascular mortality, 14% lower risk of cancer mortality, and a 12% lower risk of non-cardiovascular, non-cancer mortality. In other words, all other causes. Quoting the researchers, our study adds to the growing evidence that the benefits of UV exposure outweigh the risks in low sunlight environments. A link to the original publication is available in the box below the video. Get some UV light this winter. Immerse yourself in the tranquility of the blue. Visit a blue room soon. www.blueroom.com.
We were just talking beforehand. I know you've been on the show because I went and looked up a minute ago. Twitter went down and then Rumble went down, but I did look up like TBC Krainer. I'm like, okay, you came on with Tom Luongo and Vince, but it was so long ago. And as I was just telling you, like, I don't even know what we talked about. I have no idea. So I'm a goldfish with no short-term memory. So essentially, you're kind of coming on the show for the first time. So, Mr. Krainer, you take it away. It's your show now.
What do we want to talk about, Tommy?
I don't know. I suppose, financially, right? Trump signing that thing with the Bitcoin strategic reserve. I don't know what any of that means. All I know is gold and silver are slowly going up. Um, but do you think how much of an effect would that something like that have? Or we could talk about Twitter and Rumble going down. For all we know, we're in the opening salvos of World War III, and it just started, and now all the websites are going down. But yeah, no, it's from your point of view then. How does that change the landscape in general? Something like the Bitcoin reserve, because that's something I know nothing about.
Um, I can't speak for Bitcoin Reserve what might happen. I think that the people in charge, pretty much everybody understands that uh dollar is not forever.
Yeah,
Every fiat currency with the fullness of time, converges on its um, intrinsic value, which is zero. And today, the American economy, in the same way as all other economies around the world, have the same problem, the problem of an overhang of unpayable debts. And so today, with the case of the United States, we have good granular data, and so we know that the total credit market debt in the United States is something approaching $115 trillion, while the monetary mass is something short of $6 trillion. So it's about
20 to 1.
20 to 1. You have 20 times the debt as you have the total money that's available for the repayment of that debt. It's like the definition of unsustainable.
Yeah.
It just can't be done. And so it seems to me that the Trump administration is going to have to move towards reforming the monetary system. How exactly they're going to do it, I'm not sure. Is it going to be a gold-backed currency? Are they going to have a basket of assets, not just gold, but let's say gold, silver, energy assets, cryptocurrencies, some kind of a basket of uh, values that are going to be backing the new currency, and then that's going to help transition to some kind of a currency that people are going to use and they're going to have a confidence in, because faith and confidence is key. If people don't have confidence in it, it's it's stillborn, dead on arrival. Uh, how they're going to go about it, I don't know, and I don't know that they know yet.
Mm.
I tried to read some of the papers that are floating around the internet, but nothing. I haven't come against anything conclusive. I do know that they speak with the Russians a lot,
Sure.
and it seems that they're speaking to the Chinese a lot. I mean, just a few days ago, Trump was holding one of his pressers, and some journalist asked him about China, and Trump was going on about how he has a very good relationship with Xi Jinping. And then he said, I talked to him. And then he said, I talked to him a lot.
Mm.
So maybe, and this is a maybe because I don't know this, but maybe they're going to come up with some kind of a new trade settlement system, new payment system, and they're going to change the monetary system in the United States. But I only understand that they have to do it sooner or later, and probably sooner is better than later. And I think that they will probably coordinate this with the Russians and the Chinese for the following reason: not to have a one world global currency, but because the Russians and the Chinese have been working on this problem for many years now, and they've really dissected the problem matter very thoroughly, and they have ideas and models and propositions that I'm sure that they're sharing with people in the Trump administration, and so they're going to work something out. But I do find it interesting that practically from the moment Donald Trump has uh, has been inaugurated, the U.S. dollar index just came unglued. It just crashed, and it crashed, against the yen, the euro, and the British pound, which are all much worse than the dollar. So I don't know what's going on. I think maybe somebody is deliberately attacking the dollar, and maybe they're letting it be attacked because that does a few things that could be useful to Trump. it's a kind of a stealth devaluation. You can't devalue the dollar because it's a free floating currency, but you can do things indirectly that will depress the price of the dollar, which then means that the American exports become more competitive, and that they get to pay off foreign debts with depreciated U.S. dollars. I don't know. We'll find out. There's so many moving parts, and the rhetoric coming out of the Trump administration is absolutely all over the place.
It might even be in my completely uneducated, no wisdom in terms of finance. But it might be that it's so large, so convoluted, so complex. It's, for lack of a better phrase, it's like a 10-dimensional Chinese finger trap, in that it's not something where you can apply leverage or, hey, we got them by the balls. Let's, really let's get, it's not the Cold War where it's like, hey, they have no way to push back. Let's hit them in Afghanistan or Vietnam. It might be something that it's not out of some benevolence of they're all getting along, because that's just not human history. It might be something where, yeah, there's some closed door meeting between Trump, Putin, and Xi, or Trump and Xi, or Xi and Putin, or whatever, and they're looking at it and going, yeah, this whole thing's going to fucking explode. And the default response is war, but this will be a war that, I mean, World War II had 4 times as many deaths as World War One. This might be a war where it's 10 times as many deaths as World War Two. They might be looking at something, and it's again, it's not some pie in the sky. Let's all hold hands. It might be something like, we're all going under if there isn't some, you know, common ground or some equalizing point on the horizon that everyone can move to. And sure, there's still going to be, hegemony and competition, but no one wants to destroy the whole system. It's like the idea of nuclear war. Like, you don't make money off nuclear war. It destroys everything. They want smaller wars. Do you think it could be something like that, where it's like, hey, we're all kind of screwed?
Well, it's plausible that it could be something like that. But I think it's also entirely possible that there will be common ground, because there can be common ground, and the alternative, nuclear Armageddon, is probably the last road that we should go down, and we should make every effort not to go down that road. Um, I've I think that pretty much since maybe it was 1986 or something like that, I remember Sting. I'll explain why I'm telling you this story. Sting went to the Amazons, and he tried to, save the rainforest and the indigenous peoples living there. And well, he did that with the best of intentions, and he wanted to raise awareness. But I was 16 at the time. And for some reason, intuitively, I knew that whatever he was trying to accomplish there was completely futile. That he was, he was appealing to human reason and compassion, but that was all in opposition to a system. And that system has been so relentless and so aggressive, destructive, and pathogenic for centuries now, that of course nothing was going to come of it. People are going to say, oh, it's so terrible, but it went by its own inertia. And ever since then, so that's 1986, I think, and I was 16. Ever since then, I was wondering, what the hell is it about humanity that is driven by this aggression dynamic, which seems to incentivize the very, very worst impulses and the very worst behaviors, and it seems unstoppable.
Yeah.
And I think it took me my lifetime to work it out, but I think I did work it out. And it's about collateral. And there's only one tiny segment in society that actually cares about the collateral, and that's the bankers. You see, if if let's say the United States controls collateral in, I don't know, Saudi Arabia, right? Saudi Arabian oil, natural resource, then it's going to be that resource is going to become the collateral of American banks, which means that the American banks are going to be able to issue debt, issue credit to their clients. And by that virtue, the the financial wealth that's going to flow from that collateral is going to flow to the American banks. For everybody else, it doesn't matter. I'm from Croatia. I lived part of my life in Switzerland, in Venezuela, in Italy, in France, in Monaco. Uh, People in politics talk about having to control those resources because we need to have access to those resources. I lived in Switzerland, and there wasn't a day that you didn't have bananas and coffee and chocolate in supermarkets, and that you didn't have gasoline, at gas stations around the country. And Switzerland doesn't have any military bases. They don't control anybody's resources. They just acquire what they need through trade. They export what they have and they purchase what they need. Same for Croatia, same for France, same for Monaco, same for everywhere. So it's a myth that you need military bases because your economy depends on those resources. If it does, you can buy them. The only segment in society that gets no use of that, unless they control it and turn it into their collateral, are the bankers. And so this is the ultimate source of the whole system of incentives that percolates through the whole system, which is driving this aggression and the need for war and the need for military bases, colonization, and this type of trade. Now, if you eliminate that, if you say, no, we're not going to do that, American banks are going to finance American economy, Russian banks are going to be financing Russian economy, Chinese banks are going to finance China's economy, and we're just going to leave it at that. And then whatever we need to trade, we're going to trade it on some kind of an equitable basis. Well, if you do that, then there's no reason for anybody to go conquer anywhere. And then you can find a common ground and you can create a whole different system of trade and of international economic cooperation that doesn't require hegemony anymore at all. Of course, you need rules, you need arbitration, you need mechanisms of dispute resolve, but all of it is a hell of a lot cheaper than maintaining empires. And I think that the Chinese and the Russians are definitely sophisticated enough to understand this. I think that people in the Trump administration are sophisticated enough to understand this as well. The problem is that you have to push back against these entrenched interests that have been driving this system that, Sting tried to push against, and which is keeping us in forever wars. And they're not going to go quietly into the night. They're going to fight back with any means that are on their disposal. And that might include trying to assassinate Trump, trying to sabotage his presidency in whatever way they can, and trying to trigger World War III in Europe again, And as time goes by, we see who's driving it. And if you pay attention, you can see where their headquarters is. You always have wherever blood's flowing in rivers, it's always the same people who are knee deep in it. And I just say all roads lead to London. And now we've seen it. People have ridiculed this idea because, let's say, like, oh, well, like the British Empire no longer exists. The United States is the only superpower. Of course, it's the United States who's driving the empire. And now that Donald Trump is at the White House and he's not so interested in being the global cop for the empire, now we see who's reacting hysterically and who's trying to take up the leadership role again, and it's the British government.
Let's play, or I'll play devil's advocate. The that primary collateral, which is attained by military bases and maintenance of empire, that is the primary source from which you're talking about all things trickle down. It's the idea that all laws trickle down from, the exertion of power and violence. And sure, that's not great. Ideally, we'd all sing kumbaya. But in the same way that I pay my rent because I have to, and if it's past a certain day, you don't give them enough notice or whatever, you'll eventually be evicted. And who's going to evict me? Is it the old woman that owns this building? No, it's gonna be a legal thing and probably done by the police. I'm not going to rob from the grocery store. I know it's bad and it's not how I was raised. I also know I'm screwing over people. But if I do decide to just really say fuck it one day and not obey any ethical or moral backbone, I will eventually be caught by the police and there will be repercussions. And so from those, I would say those are necessary. And it allows the rest of the society, the rest of the system to interact without, my landlord having to come on the first of every month with an AR and say pay rent or not, and the next door pay rent or not. It's a much more sophisticated. Like everyone knows where it eventually goes. Well, if this doesn't happen and this doesn't happen, it goes here to here to here. It ends with the sheriff throwing you out of your apartment, and no one wants that. This could be my own limited cognition, or it could be a form of Stockholm syndrome to say we need global empire because without that, the rest of the system won't interact. But just kind of firing from the hip, my first gut response to everything you said is someone's going to have the military bases, and if we pack them all up and go America's done, no part of me believes that the rest of the world will clap and then we'll all just get along. Human history would dictate long before the US empire and long after, the power will flow from force. And I don't even say it's a good thing. Ideally we would have that. Ideally we'd all love each other as God loves us and happy go lucky blah blah blah. But that's not where we live. And so I think those things are probably never going to go away. They seem to be an inherent part of human cognition and instinct. And you could argue then, well, human cognition and instinct is outdated. Probably. And much like we replaced the apes, something will replace us that maybe isn't based on resource scarcity, the ability to, pass on more progeny than any. Like at the end of the day, we are still based on how much stuff do I have, how much sex do I have, and how cool am I. That's kind of like the basis of all human driving. We dress it up as something else. We are animals. But this is kind of the world we live in, and I'm biased, obviously, in the United States, and I love the United States. I think there's always going to be a hegemon, and I would rather it be me than someone else. And that's
Well,
not
but the
really, yeah,
United States, the United States, the very creation of the United States was a rebellion
against it. Oh yeah,
against
no. Oh no,
an
absolutely. It
empire.
was it was leave me beware foreign entanglements. Yeah, no, the entire
Yeah,
idea is not to do it. I'm
and
not defending it. I'm saying it's just what
no,
I
the
think.
the idea that you need a hegemon might seem like an inevitable thing, but you
It
have
might
to
not be.
realize
Yeah.
that everything we know about history is what we've been taught.
Absolutely. It's
And the empire has been with us for probably most of the past 500 years, and it has always invested very heavily in producing the narratives that
yeah,
justify.
that's a fair point. The
And
empire
it's
always
always it's
wins.
always been like at first it was, well, we have to bring the word of Christ
Yeah.
to the savages, and then we have to civilize them. And now it's kind of evolved to we have to bring them freedom and democracy. Well, now it's obvious that that's not what's happening either. I mean, look at Europe. And then, another problem with that is that empires are by definition unsustainable. Every single one of them has collapsed. And not only has it collapsed, it's first created chaos and misery at home. And it never has to do anything with you. Like when you say like I'd rather it be me. Well, it never is you.
No.
It's always money lending oligarchies they like you as much as they like the Saudis and the Chinese and the Irish and the
As much as
Russians.
I'm useful. Yeah.
Yeah. So this empire is going to collapse like all other ones have.
Hmm.
Uh, is hegemony necessary? I don't think it is. I think that uh, military power will be necessary because you're going to need to enforce an order in some way. But going to war is always very, very costly. And so you're going to be pushed to go to war if somebody has the incentive, if there's something to be gained from going to war. If it's just cost, leading to a whole lot of destruction and death, then it's always going to be easier and cheaper to settle it in some other way. And part of the problem with us in the West is that this has been culturally entrenched very heavily. If you look at China, China in all of its history has never colonized anywhere. They traveled and explored extensively, but they never colonized. They traded. They were not necessarily, how do you call it? They looked to their own interest. It was never about, being, how do you call it? Generous and giving gifts. They're doing their thing for their own best interest, but they never conquered and they never colonized. The only time they ever even attempted to go conquer anywhere was twice in their 3,000 years of history, and while they were being ruled by the Mongols. So in Chinese culture, they don't they just don't even look to go abroad and conquer places. They look to develop trade relations. And if you look at the way China is developing, they're getting a whole lot of bad rap, but I don't know. I follow a lot of accounts of Westerners living in China. Most of that bad rap is the result of the $500 million that is being spent on anti-Chinese propaganda. You know, there that buys you a lot of think tanks and a lot of people in the mainstream media who are saying, "Oh, Chinese style this and Chinese style that," social credit system and um, total surveillance and this and that. And people who live there say like, "What the hell are you guys talking about? And there's nothing like this here.
Yeah.
It's very different." And then when you look at what they've done, uh, you know, for example, they built something like 32,000 kilometers. What's that? About 24,
20,000. Yeah.
25,000 kilometers, miles of high-speed
Right.
railroads. Um, how many has the United States built?
China poured more concrete between 2016 and 2018 than the U.S. did between 1900 and 2018. They're
Yeah,
building
there you go.
as opposed
And
to
it's
our export
so
is explosions.
yeah,
Yeah, that's a
exactly.
fair critique.
And so, it doesn't this this culture that got entrenched in the West, which was not, it's not a spontaneous thing. It's like, like you send adventurers over to South America which completely plunder its gold and silver and enslave the whole population to dig up more gold and silver, and you send it all back to Spain, well, and you end up destroying those civilizations almost completely and depopulating that whole part of the world. Well, you have to justify that somehow. So you start paying universities, you start creating these endowments, you start giving grants to researchers who are going to tell you that like, oh, this just didn't have immunity to the germs that we brought there. Like we didn't mean nothing by it, but like that it just happened. And then you have to paint them as savages, and you need to show their cultures and civilizations to be inferior to ours. And like the Spaniards did that, the British did that, the Dutch did that, and we're still doing that, and we're still going around like, oh yeah, freedom and democracy, that's the best thing ever, and we have to bring it to other people, even if it means forcing it on there. But now it's gone beyond freedom and democracy. Now they're demanding, like, oh, if you want to get the IMF loan, well, you have to have a Pride Month, and you have to have once or twice a year, you need to have a Pride parade
Mm-hmm.
in your country.
Yeah.
And you have to put this into your curriculum, the LGBT thing, and so like the world says, no, it doesn't work for us. Anyway, it's a long story, but we in the West really, really have to understand that we have lived in a particular matrix for generations now. Like imagine chickens who were born in a feedlot, and all they've ever known is the feedlot.
Mm-hmm.
They have no concept of living outside in the sun. And they think that the farmer who comes around and brings food
Their friend.
is a friend. Look, he brings us food. Or look at this wonderful technology, the lights and the food just flows there. And then, they get very excited. They might get very, if they could speak and if they were capable of abstract thought, they might get very excited about details of the matrix of the feedlot's design and the color of the lights and when it goes off and when it goes on. And whatever you might imagine that defines their life in that feedlot, but never any concept of who exactly they are if they were living like God intended it to be.
Yeah.
And so they'll have a lot of opinions about the matrix, about the feedlot, but no concept of what if life was completely otherwise. And so, I do question it. I have questioned it a very long time. I have the fortune of having grown up in a completely different system. I grew up in a communist country under, one party communist government rule. It was very different, and the culture was largely different, and the daily reality of life was different.
No, I think there's something to be said for, yeah, I mean, history is dictated by the victors. And, we've seen in the last 2, 4, 8 years just how much of like, I think that's what's kind of twisted my mind more than anything. Is like you always know there's a media narrative, there's always, the state narrative. But seeing with my own eyes, just in the lifetime of this podcast, where it's not even some weird memory of when I was young, I'm like, no, I can go back and find the show that I did from this chair. And it's having doctors on saying, well, Fauci just said this. And then we pull up a clip and it goes, and there's Fauci saying it. And we go, yeah, I mean, I don't know. And then you go forward a couple of years and they're like, Anthony, not the doctors, but like, the news, it's like Anthony Fauci never said that. And it's like, there's video evidence of me watching the video evidence. And then when
Yeah,
you see
yeah,
that and
yeah.
the boldness with which they will take it and say, don't trust your eyes and ears, well, you then have to extrapolate and you go, what is all of, U.S. history look like? What does all of human history look like?
Yeah, exactly.
If
Exactly.
they're willing to
You
do
got it
that,
exactly right.
if they're
That's the problem, you know, like
it's
we
like
don't,
if they're willing to do that with like my own evidence of me watching it, what are they willing to do when like 1% of 1% of 1% of people could read and write? What are they
yeah,
willing to say? Like, and there's no
exactly.
pictures, no one had phones. Yeah, you just say whatever you want. And I was king for 100 years, and everyone loved me. That's now fact. No one can
Yes.
detest it, so it does make sense then to follow that all the way up. And if that is at its core, if the foundation is flawed, then if you have a flawed mass of a proton, every other assumption in physics as you get bigger will be incorrect. So you then have to go, well, if my, necessary evil is that there has to be a hegemon, if I'm basing that not on geologic records or mathematics, but just the story of every empire, which I would imagine now are all lying through their teeth, you then have to go, who's telling you that hegemony is necessary? It's every hegemon throughout history. They're going, thank God for us Romans, written by the Romans. Like, thank God for America, written by America. You then have to start going, well, how much of it is true? And maybe it is true, but you have to come to that through your own deductive reasoning, not because some history book told you so. That was written with influence by the hegemon telling you that the hegemon was necessary. So I'm
Yeah.
with you on that, man. It might not be.
Yeah, and you know, we've seen a lot of this in our lifetime, and I think that the reason why they're so bold and brazen is because they expect that they will be able to write history in the way that suits them. And then all of these inconvenient facts and all of these experiences that we lived, one day they're going to tell, no, no, it was never like that, you know. It was well, you see that, you know, like with the how they, you know, they blew up the Nord Stream pipelines.
Mm-hmm.
And now that's a problem. And then they came out with a story that was so ridiculous that not even my dead dog would believe it anymore. But you know, they will push that lie until one day, you know, when people's memories are vague or you know, young people don't have a memory of this. Well, they say like, well, of course we would never have done such a thing. That was just a bunch of Ukrainians who had a, or better yet, they will say like, what Nord Stream pipeline? There never was such a thing
There
as a
was never a Nord
Stream.
Stream
There
pipeline.
never was any. That's a
You're
myth.
you're overreacting.
Yeah, that's a myth. It never existed. You know, like in the same way as they, you know, if you follow people like what's his face, the British I know his name, but I don't know why I'm blanking out now. Graham
Hancock?
Graham Graham Hancock. You know, if you see how tenaciously they fight to keep
Do
the
you
things
think?
that he's discovering or articulating, how hard they're fighting to keep that out of the narrative to make sure that people are never exposed to it. Well, then you realize they, you know, like they have a lot invested in the narrative as it is, and we have no reason to think
Yeah.
that that narrative is true at all. In fact, we have every reason to believe that it's false and that it's misleading us for a reason.
Hmm. Yeah. If they're that rabid about suppressing Graham Hancock, talking about some stones in Syria 14,000 years ago,
Yeah.
how rabid do you think they are about the importance of the Bretton Woods Conference?
Yeah. For
How rabid do
example,
you think they are at the DoD budget? Something that is
yeah,
alive and well today.
yes. And you know, for example, we also know that when World War One ended, they made sure to disappear as much of the documentation about the war and the duration, you know, the time preceding the war and the time during the war. They have uh, they have places. I think it's called something like Henslow Park or Menslow Park, something like this in the UK, where they buried all the documents and they're guarded more securely than the gold in the city of London. It's like a double fence with razor wires, with motion detection cameras, with armed guards, so that nobody can. And then
I'm gonna hold on, I'm gonna look that up. Menlo Park.
yeah, I wish I could find it now. I have it somewhere, but
Royal Air Force Base, Henlow.
yeah, I don't know. It could be. Oh, Hanslope, Hanslope Park. So they have, it's guarded by a 7 foot high chain link fence, beyond which is a 10 foot topped by coils of razor wire. Every few yards between the fences are CCTV cameras and floodlights. The facility keeps millions of files with top secret documents about World War One, but also earlier events, including the horrors of the British colonial rule in Kenya and elsewhere. And then, they sent Herbert Hoover to fetch all those documents from France, from Belgium, from Russia, um, and to basically disappear them. Some of the stuff was really disappeared and burned. Some of it was hidden away. And like we are we're still making discoveries about how World War One came about and how World War Two came about. And it's very clear that it's not the way they taught us in school. So you got to ask yourself, why the hell did they create this children's fairy tales for us and taught them to us? Well, I'll give you a good example. For example, I studied in the United States, and in my senior year, both semester, it was U.S. history, and second semester, I think we studied the Civil War. Not even once was there any mention about the role of Britain
Mm-hmm.
or about the role of Russia. It was all about the emancipation of slaves, even though historians know and understand that it was not about the emancipation of slaves. It was a geopolitical event because in the 19th century, the United States was rising as a major power, and the British, who were still at the zenith of the British Empire, wanted to destroy a power that could rival them. And so they decided to try to partition the United States into two smaller, weaker client states that they could pit one against the other, and then, give them credit and supply them with arms and keep them weak to be able to dominate them. It's the simple divide and rule game. And so they were supporting the South against the North, against Lincoln. And Lincoln was close to being defeated. And then in 1863, Russia's Tsar Alexander II sent his Baltic fleet to New York and his Pacific fleet to San Francisco, where they anchored for 6 months and made it impossible for the British and the French to intervene on the side of the South, which is what they were planning to do. Now, I made my own personal, like, informal poll among my American friends and relatives, and I asked them, like, hey, so what do you think the Civil War was about? To a person, they all said, oh, it was about the freeing the slaves. And then I asked them, like, what role did Russia play in the Civil War? And we're like, Russia in the US Civil War? Nothing. You see, how could that possibly happen? One of the most important events in all of US history that people have a completely distorted understanding about what actually happened, and that a major part of it got so completely obscure that they think it never happened. And so I think that all of history as we know it is always distorted by just enough that we don't catch exactly those lessons that we should be learning. Everything. History of World War I, history of World War II, who knows what else. It's like that. And so then, we also have distorted views about how to go forward, which is exactly why they lie to us, so that we can't even imagine how different things could be and how much better our lives could be if we, busted out of the matrix. Stay in the feedlot, the farmer's taking care of you.
Alex, give me 2 seconds. I had my windows cracked because it was hot in here, and now it's fucking freezing. Tell everyone. I'll be right back. Tell everybody where to find you, social, all that good shit.
Yeah, so I'm active on X. My handle is @NakedHedgie. I publish a daily trend following signals newsletter on my iSystem trend following Substack. And I also publish a personal Substack called Alex Krainer Substack, where I publish a bit less frequently, but generally more researched articles that take longer to put together. So that's where I'm active mostly.
It does make sense that much, and I don't even think it has to be like a running thread. It probably is, but it doesn't even have to be like a running thread of whatever you want to call it, Illuminati, New World Order, like whatever occult runs the planet. It doesn't even have to be that there's a common thread from the dawn of time until now, and they have the real history. It could just be that this is a phenomena of like whoever is the hegemon. I don't know.
It does seem that there's a common pattern to the events that stretches back to about Greek antiquity, as far as we know. And it always, always, always runs back to the moneylenders. Sparta, Rome. It was actually Greek bankers that migrated to Rome and started their own money lending businesses. And then I think by 509 BC, they got rid of the last king. And ever since, they've been banging the drums about, democracy and stuff. Because you see, what happens is if you have a king or a sovereign of some sort, like a dictator or autocrat, who is on top of the food chain, on top of the social hierarchy, they could cut their oligarchy down to size. They can put them in their play box and say, "This is where you play, and you don't go beyond it." Now, what happens in what we call democracies is that you eliminate that person, you create a facade of a democracy, but the real levers of control are held by this money lending oligarchy, but they're hidden. And what they do is they do whatever they want, but they give you the illusion that you can elect somebody to defend your interests. And then, if you're not happy with that, then you go like, okay, well, next election we're gonna elect this other puppet. And then, then again, the same thing happens. And then 4 years later, you go like, well, this time we're going to elect these other people. But certain policies continue exactly the same, whether you have Democrats in power or whether you have Republicans in power. I mean, Trump is a different thing. I'm not putting him in that same basket. And you have the same in Britain. You had this continuity of policy under Tory governments, and then now they have a Labour government in power, and they're the biggest warmongers ever. And they're continuing the same policies exactly like there's no change. There's no change whatsoever. Whereas, when Vladimir Putin came to power in Russia, which was he was elected in 2000, but he already was the acting president in 1999. One of the first things he did, he lined up all his oligarchs and he set the rules of the game. And when they challenged him, they lost. They had these lawsuits that they all ended up losing. And one of them tried to challenge him politically, and he ended up in prison. Mikhail Khodorkovsky. He was busted in 2003. He was arrested. He spent 9 years in prison, and now he's in exile in London. Oh, London again. Strange. Always comes up. And but what happened? The rules that Vladimir Putin set for them. He said, "Okay, you got what you got. It's not going to be taken away from you. Run your businesses, pay your taxes correctly, treat your employees well, and stay out of politics." And this last one was, the thing that was most contentious for the oligarchs, but eventually he prevailed, and they had to make peace with the fact that they do not control politics in Russia. And then look at the transformation between Russia before Putin, Russia after Putin. Before Putin, Russia was a complete and total disaster. It was one of the most corrupt countries in the world. Their GDP in the 90s collapsed by about 50%, worse than during World War II. 40% of the population was in poverty. Debt to GDP was 140%. And on and on and on. It was like their military was in disarray. The country was on the verge of collapse. Today, it's again a superpower. Their standards of actually, if you put it, Russian GDP growth next to Chinese GDP growth from the time Putin came to power, actually, Russian GDP growth outpaced that of China. And now you see that they're a military power. They're developing well. Putin has suppressed corruption to a very large degree. And this is not, this is just not me saying. There's World Bank and Gallup polls that are being conducted, and the corruption has really decreased dramatically. People's perception of their freedom and happiness has gone much, 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 much higher. If you ask people, is the country developing in a good way? Vast majority say yes. Do you trust Vladimir Putin? Majority says yes. Do you approve of his job performance? It's something around 80% positive, and it has averaged between 60 and 70% since he's been in power. So, people who live there and who feel the effects of his governance on their skin approve of his performance. What's wrong with that? And why is Western style democracy better than that? But like the point is, in Russia, people know where the buck stops. And if oligarchs try to abuse the system, well, there's somebody who can yank their chain.
Well, that kind of comes back to what we were talking about earlier. All order is derived from a common apex violence. That's ultimately what it is. It's not. We can call it the buck stops here, but what it means is that they're going to stop or they're going to end up dead, and that is. I don't even think it's a bad thing. I think that's just.
Well, it isn't. You have to think of a country. Somebody gets hurt in Russia, and people say, like, "Oh, what a terrible place! Look at what happens." Vladimir Putin doesn't assassinate people. He uses laws as they're written and enforced in Russia. Even people in Russia don't think that, all of those Navalny's and Nemtsov and Anna Politkovskaya and all of those people, nobody thinks that Vladimir Putin had them assassinated. That's purely an artifact of Western mainstream media. But you need to think of these people like Putin and Xi and Donald Trump and, leaders of countries as captains on a ship.
Mm-hmm.
And if the ship is sailing through a storm, everybody who's in charge is accountable to the whole society, to the whole collective. And so if you have somebody who's undermining the order, somebody who's disobeying orders, somebody who is putting the whole enterprise at risk, well, then they need to be removed or they have to be disciplined or something. It's not about giving hugs to everybody and being nice and being kind. Putin cannot go hug 140 million Russians. His responsibility is to make sure that the ship sails through the storm intact with the least damage sustained. And that's what he's doing, and that's what he's doing really, really well. And the fact that somebody gets thrown overboard here and there, well, that's how it is. But he's accountable to everybody who is on that ship, 140, 145 million Russians, not to Alexei Navalny because, we in the West decided that he's this bleeding heart Democrat and a human rights crusader.
Would the U.S. benefit from a Putin? No right or wrong
Um,
answer. Just I kind of think it would. I'd be completely
how do you
honest.
mean if the United States would benefit from a Putin? Oh yeah,
From a Putin,
definitely.
from an American Putin, and I'll
Yeah,
I'll
yeah,
go
yeah,
first and
because he
say I think they would.
definitely,
I really think they
yeah,
would. The
because
bureaucratic state
what
is bureaucratic state is so out of control, so bloated, and so whether it's incapable or unwilling, but to go help people after the hurricane in North Carolina, but still send $500 million to Lebanon or some shit to build a railroad. I mean, it's clearly not working.
yeah, yeah, yeah. What you need, the biggest thing you need is um to put the oligarchy in their playpen
Mm-hmm.
and to curtail their power because that's where most of the abuse comes from. Most of the problems that people experience day to day is the oligarchic abuse. And it's always hidden and it's always almost impossible for the people to push back because they don't know what to push back against. It's dispersed in all the many institutions of the system, and you're always encouraged to work through the institutions of the system, and you can never get a change. And meanwhile, if you look at what you get, in a democracy, people should opt for, a good economy, safe streets, a good life, good standards of living, um, and on and on and on. And no war. Americans always vote for anti-war candidates, but they somehow always get more
Still
war.
somehow always end up
And
in a we just can't avoid it. It's sorry
yeah,
guys, we gotta send 500,000 Marines to this
yeah,
country.
because this
Just
guy over there is really, really bad, and we
he's
have to get
this
rid of
is
him.
this time he's the one. We really I know
Yeah,
we
yeah,
fucked up in Korea and Nam and GWAT and Ukraine, but I'm telling you for reals, this one's a baddie. He's gotta
yeah,
go.
yeah,
He's
yeah.
gotta
It's
go.
it's it's always it's always like that. So you always vote against war, but you always get more war. You
But
want a
just
better economy, but economy keeps deteriorating.
do you want a better economy? Well, we got a war for that. We can
Yeah,
so
yeah,
we can go. Hey, we're gonna. It is like comical. It's not like I voted for Trump. I like Trump, but it is comical where it's like let's seal up the southern border, and within a week, it's like we're gonna designate everyone in Mexico as a terrorist. And you're like, wait, like we're sending surveillance planes. You're like, motherfucker. It really is. I mean, when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail, and it's just like, geez, you can't get away. I guess the upside would be there seems to be at least I don't know if it. Again, I don't know what's theater and what's legitimate, but there seems to be a reeling back from the U.S. carrying the burden of the Ukraine war just in the last week or two. Whenever
Yeah.
the blow up in the Oval Office was that last. I don't know. There seems to be a winding back from that. Now you have all of Europe saying we don't need the U.S. Well, and it's like cool, go for it. But
Yeah, 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 exactly.
I mean,
Exactly.
hopefully that it would be nice for a change to just see like war not escalate.
Yeah.
Like, what if it
Yeah.
didn't just get worse? What if we just
Well,
really
to
bad?
Trump's credit, in during his first term, and I think that his first term was a bit wasted because he surrounded himself with all the wrong people, but he didn't start any new wars.
Yeah.
Obama did, Bush did, Biden did, Trump didn't. And now he's positively trying to uh, backtrack away from wars and entanglements and all this military adventurism. And I think he's dead serious because actually, no, the choice is not to be opportunistic and then to do a little bit of war here and there. The choice is to actually completely break with the system of governance that's been um, that's that's pretty much hijacked the United States um, for I think pretty much the last
100 years.
century,
Yeah,
if not
so yeah,
longer.
no, I mean, it's a racket, right? Smedley Butler,
Yeah,
war is a racket. He wrote that in
yeah, it's a racket.
1933.
It's exactly the racket, a
Yeah,
racket, and it's taken it's taken the American people's prosperity and their political and military strength, and it's squandered it all on maintenance of an empire that is of no benefit to the American people. It's a benefit to the banking establishment, to the banking cartel, and most of the ultimate um, beneficial owners of that cartel are not even Americans. They're Europeans. They're European banking families. And now they're a little bit hysterical because the United States is resigning from that role.
yeah. It's not even an empire that like I don't know we get to benefit from. It really
No,
it does,
no.
right?
Well, look at this. Look at the streets of the American cities.
Yeah,
Look at
no,
the state of
yeah.
it.
We're not benefiting from a
Look at the infrastructure of the United States.
yeah,
Look at the technological progress. I mean,
yeah.
the United States is still a leader in certain technologies in the world, but China is now the leader in most key technologies in the world. And that happened in the last 15, 20 years. That didn't happen, it wasn't always like that. Um, 20 years ago, and this is actually tracked by some institute in Australia called ASPI, Australian, well, I don't know, I forget but I'm pretty sure it's ASPI, and they track uh, different nations' performance on 64 key technologies. And they measure, how much money is invested, how many patents are registered, how many papers are published in peer-reviewed journals, and well, all that. And uh, in 2007, the United States was the global leader in 60 out of 64 of those technologies. Today, China is the global leader in 57 of those 64 technologies, and the United States
Jeez,
only on the remaining seven. How the hell did that happen?
wow.
It's not random. It's so anyway, it's not the people problem, it's the system of governance problem. And that system of governance has been favoring a ruling oligarchy that's hidden behind a facade of democracy. And they're absolutely terrified that some autocrat is going to emerge and is going to cut them down to size and set the rules on them that they will not be able to violate or else. Which is what happened in China, which is what happened in Russia. And now China and Russia are
Doing well.
well-ordered, advancing societies. And I think that Trump is dead serious about putting the America back on track again as well.
I hope he does. I think it has to be done. But yeah, Alex, let's wrap this up. We're running on an hour. Dude, I appreciate your time. That was enjoyable as always. I appreciate it. And yeah, sorry again about the timing and shit. I didn't again. Yeah,
No, that's okay.
with
I
daylight
I
savings, really.
completely overlooked the fact that we had a
No,
time
so did
change,
I. I didn't look at it either. I didn't. I set my
which
oven
messes.
last
Yeah.
night, so I didn't even realize it was changed. Yeah, I'm an idiot. But yeah, dude, I'll send this to you. It'll probably be up like tomorrow or something. But the Spotify will be up today. I'll send it to you. I'll email it to you. I'd love to have you on again sometime, man. That was awesome.
Cool, with pleasure, Tommy. It
All right,
was
bro.
good to chat,
It was
and
fun.
until the next time.
That was fun. In conclusion, America needs a Putin. I think that's the thesis. That's the concluding sentence. I'll slap
Yeah,
on that.
well, it has a kind of it has a kind of wannabe Putin. I think
Yeah.
I wish him success,
Yeah. So do
honestly.
I. So do I.
It's not just the United States, this is I think the fate of humanity
I
is it depends on this.
I think it's and you can debate the objective good or bad of that, but I think it's what we are as a species and what we are as animals. I think you need a strong man. I really do. It's
Well,
I
in sports, in
yeah, you have a team
orchestras,
captain. You have a
have
superstar.
directors.
You have the big
Sports
name.
teams have captains and coaches. Military units have commanders. We're social animals, but we need structure. And anybody who's a parent knows this. If you don't set your limit, if you don't set limits on your kids,
They'll run
it
it.
can be
Yeah.
really, truly disastrous. The kids are adorable and everything, but it can be a nightmare.
Hmm.
Once you set your limits on them, they're little angels.
Yeah. No, 100%.
And somebody can come and say like, "Oh, how cruel you are that you don't allow your kid to do this and that." It doesn't. You don't. You reprimand them if they put curtains on fire. Well, they should have the right to put the curtains
Yeah.
on fire.
Yeah. We should
Well,
have
no, I disagree because we all live in this
we
house,
all live.
and
Yeah.
the order has to be acceptable to everyone.
Yeah. And I
So,
don't care if 9 kids say I want to light it on fire and one dad says no. You go, that's only 1 of 10. How about shut the fuck up? It's the thing we're doing.
yeah,
It's just I
exactly.
don't care if nine
Yeah.
kids said we're lighting
And
it
then
on
maybe
fire.
if you take the matches away from them and they
Yeah.
throw a tantrum, they'll get over it.
Yeah. Crack
Really.
them. It works out. And then in 20 years, in 20 years, tell me how well behaved those kids are. I guarantee you they will all be
Exactly.
upstanding members of society. So
Exactly.
I'm with you. Strongman government is what we need. And we'll
Yeah.
wrap it up with that. Alex, dude, thank you so much for your time, man.
Thank you. Take care.
All
Bye
right,
bye.
brother.